I should have known that day would change everything. Emma was so excited about her great-grandmother's 75th birthday party, twirling in her new pink dress that we had saved for weeks to buy. For once, I felt hopeful that my family might actually accept us, that maybe my 8-year-old daughter could experience what normal grandchildren feel. But as we walked into that house, I noticed the familiar tension in the air, the way my brother Marcus looked at us with that same dismissive expression, the way my father Robert's eyes held that cold disapproval. Before I continue with what happened that day, please let me know where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happened next will make you unable to believe how cruel family can actually be. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of my grandmother Dorothy's sprawling two-story home as Emma and I arrived 30 minutes behind schedule. I had been working an extra shift at the diner, and the tips from lunch service meant we could finally afford the small gift we had wrapped so carefully. The house buzzed with the familiar chaos of a family gathering. Decorations hung from every doorway, a massive buffet table groaned under the weight of casseroles and desserts, and relatives I saw maybe twice a year, clustered in small groups throughout the living room and kitchen. Marcus stood near the fireplace, commanding attention as always. At 35, my older brother had everything I lacked: his successful law practice, his expensive suit, his confident laugh that filled rooms. Patricia, his wife of 10 years, stood beside him in her designer dress, her diamond earrings catching the light as she gestured dramatically while telling some story about their recent vacation to Napa Valley. Even their 12-year-old son Tyler carried himself with that same entitled confidence, his new iPad never leaving his hands. My father Robert dominated the center of the room, his authoritative voice discussing politics with my uncles. At 62, he still commanded respect through sheer presence. His traditional values shaped our family dynamics for decades, and his word remained law in most matters. The way he looked at Emma and me when we entered spoke volumes. His eyes held that familiar mixture of disappointment and judgment that I had grown accustomed to over the years. Emma clung to my hand as we navigated through the crowd. She had been so excited during the drive over, chattering about seeing her cousins and helping with the party preparations. But now, surrounded by adults who barely acknowledged her presence, she seemed smaller, somehow more fragile in her carefully chosen dress. I volunteered to help set up the sound system for Grandma Dorothy's birthday speech, grateful to have something useful to contribute. My communications degree might not have led to the career I had dreamed of, but at least I knew how to handle basic audio equipment. Marcus watched me work with that familiar dismissive expression. Typical Haley, making herself useful for once, he muttered to his wife loud enough for me to hear. Patricia laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the party atmosphere. I focused on connecting the wireless microphone to the speaker system, testing the levels carefully. Emma stood beside me, eager to help with what she called grown-up stuff. Her small hands held the microphone stand steady while I adjusted the height. The system worked perfectly, clear sound filling the room during my test. Satisfied, I placed the wireless receiver on the side table near the speakers and handed the microphone to Grandma Dorothy for her speech later. What none of us realized was that the receiver remained active, ready to pick up any sound within its range. In all the excitement and preparation, this small detail would prove more significant than anyone could have imagined. The first sign of trouble came when Emma accidentally bumped into Tyler while reaching for a cookie from the dessert table. Tyler had been absorbed in his iPad, standing too close to the table's edge. When Emma's elbow connected with his arm, the expensive device slipped from his hands and crashed to the hardwood floor. The sound of cracking glass echoed through the nearby conversations. Patricia's shriek pierced the air before anyone could assess the damage. "Look what your daughter did!" she cried, rushing to examine the iPad's shattered screen. The device still functioned, but spiderweb cracks spread across the display like a broken windshield. Marcus stepped forward immediately, his lawyer instincts taking control of the situation. "Haley, you need to control your child," he said, his tone carrying the same authority he used in courtrooms. "This is exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about." Emma's face crumpled with guilt and fear. She had not meant any harm, simply reaching for a treat like any other child at the party. I knelt beside her, placing a protective arm around her small shoulders while addressing the situation calmly. "I am so sorry about Tyler's iPad," I said, meaning every word. "I will absolutely pay for the repair or replacement." The offer strained my already tight budget, but Emma's well-being mattered more than my financial concerns. Robert approached our small group, his disapproving expression deepening as he surveyed the scene. "This is exactly why children need proper fathers in their lives," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Discipline and structure prevent these kinds of incidents." The relatives nearby fell silent, some nodding in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable with the public criticism. Grandma Dorothy tried to diffuse the tension, suggesting that accidents happen and no one was hurt, but Marcus dominated the conversation with his concerns about teaching children responsibility and consequences. Emma pressed closer to my side, her earlier excitement replaced by confusion and shame. She whispered an apology that broke my heart, taking responsibility for what was clearly an accident. The 8-year-old girl who had been so proud of her dress and so eager to help with the party preparations now seemed to shrink before the adult criticism surrounding her. Tyler, meanwhile, had retrieved his iPad and discovered that despite the cracked screen, all his games still worked perfectly. But the damage was done. The adults had found their conflict, and Emma had become the focal point of their judgment. The wireless microphone system continued recording everything, the receiver silently capturing each word, each tone, each cruel judgment passed against my daughter. But in that moment, focused on comforting Emma and managing the immediate crisis, none of us paid attention to the small black device sitting innocuously on the side table. The tension from the iPad incident had barely settled when Grandma Dorothy decided it was time for her birthday speech. She had been looking forward to addressing her family, sharing memories and wisdom accumulated over 75 years of life. The relatives gathered around the living room, some sitting on the comfortable sofas, others standing along the walls, creating a semicircle around the designated speaking area. Emma, still shaken from the earlier confrontation, but determined to be part of the celebration, spotted an empty chair near the gift table where she could get a better view of her great-grandmother. The chair was slightly wobbly, one of those antique pieces that looked elegant, but had seen better days structurally. Emma climbed up carefully, her small hands gripping the back for balance as she tried to see over the heads of the taller adults. I noticed her precarious position and started to move toward her, but Grandma Dorothy had begun speaking, and I did not want to cause a disruption. Emma seemed stable enough, and she was clearly enjoying the special moment of being included in such an important family gathering. Grandma Dorothy's voice filled the room as she shared stories about her childhood, her marriage to our grandfather, and the joy she found in watching her family grow through the generations. Her words painted pictures of simpler times, of values that had guided her through decades of change and challenge. Emma listened intently, her young face serious with concentration as she absorbed her great-grandmother's wisdom. Then the chair began to wobble more violently. Emma tried to steady herself by reaching for the nearest stable surface, which happened to be the edge of the gift table's lace tablecloth. Her small fingers clutched the delicate fabric as the chair tilted dangerously to one side. Time seemed to slow as the inevitable unfolded. The chair toppled completely, sending Emma tumbling to the floor. Her desperate grip on the tablecloth pulled the entire covering sideways, creating a domino effect that sent presents sliding and rolling across the hardwood. Flowers scattered from their arrangements, their water spreading in dark puddles. But the most devastating casualty was Grandma Dorothy's antique crystal vase, a family heirloom that had belonged to her own mother, which shattered into countless pieces as it hit the floor. The sound of breaking crystal cut through Grandma Dorothy's speech like a physical blow. Conversation stopped instantly. Even the babies in the room seemed to sense the gravity of what had happened, their crying ceasing, as if they too understood that something precious had been lost forever. Emma lay among the scattered gifts and broken glass, crying hysterically. The combination of the fall, the loud crash, and the sudden attention of every adult in the room overwhelmed her 8-year-old nervous system. She was not seriously injured, but she was terrified and confused by the chaos she had accidentally created. I rushed to her immediately, carefully lifting her away from the broken glass while checking for cuts or bruises. Emma clung to me desperately, her small body shaking with sobs that seemed too large for her tiny frame. All around us, relatives stood frozen in shock, staring at the destruction as if they could not quite process what had happened. Grandma Dorothy's face showed heartbreak that went beyond the monetary value of the lost vase. That piece of crystal had connected her to her own mother, carried memories of a different era, represented continuity across generations. Now it lay in fragments, irreplaceable and irretrievable. The silence stretched uncomfortably long, filled only by Emma's diminishing sobs and the sound of my whispered comfort. I could feel the weight of judgment from every person in the room, could sense the blame being assigned before anyone spoke a word. Emma was just a child who had tried to see better, who had wanted to be part of the celebration, but I knew that explanation would not matter to everyone present. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and something darker. His successful lawyer composure cracked as he surveyed the scene, his attention focusing entirely on Emma, as if she had deliberately orchestrated the destruction. The muscle in his jaw twitched, a warning sign I recognized from our childhood when his temper reached dangerous levels. "What is wrong with you?" Marcus exploded, his voice booming across the silent room. He strode toward us with purposeful steps, his face flushed red with fury that seemed disproportionate to the accident. Emma shrank against me instinctively, recognizing the threat in his approach. "Marcus, she is just 8 years old," I said firmly, positioning myself between him and Emma. It was clearly an accident. She was trying to see Grandma's speech better. "Accident?" Marcus's voice dripped with disbelief and contempt. "This is pure lack of discipline, Haley. This is what happens when children grow up without proper boundaries or consequences." He towered over Emma, his 6-foot frame intimidating even to adults, let alone a frightened child. Emma tried to explain through her tears, her words coming out in broken fragments about the wobbly chair and wanting to see great-grandma better. But Marcus cut her off with a sharp gesture. "I do not want to hear excuses from a brat who has no respect for other people's property." He snarled, his professional vocabulary replaced by raw anger. "Someone needs to teach her that actions have consequences." I stepped directly between Marcus and Emma, my protective instincts overriding any concern for family peace. "Do not you dare touch my daughter." I warned, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. Marcus pushed me aside with enough force to make me stumble. "Someone needs to teach her consequences, since her mother obviously will not," he declared to the room full of witnesses. This kind of behavior is exactly what happens when women try to raise children alone. The room full of relatives watched in stunned silence as Marcus raised his hand menacingly above Emma. She flinched instinctively, her small arms coming up to protect her face in a gesture that broke my heart. The 8-year-old girl who had been so excited about the party was now cowering in terror from her own uncle. Then Marcus brought his hand down across Emma's face with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. The force of the blow knocked Emma sideways, and she fell to the floor again, her small hand immediately moving to cover the reddening handprint on her cheek. The room fell into a silence so complete that even the sound of breathing seemed loud. Every eye in the house focused on the scene before them, a grown man standing over a small child he had just struck, while that child curled into a protective ball on the floor. Marcus stood over Emma's crumpled form with satisfaction, as if he had solved a complex problem through decisive action. "Like mother, like daughter," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "Both are completely useless." His cruel laugh followed those devastating words, a sound that seemed to bounce off the walls and amplify in the shocked silence. The laugh contained no warmth, no family affection, only cold satisfaction at having delivered what he considered justice. Robert stepped forward then, and for a moment I hoped my father would condemn what had just happened, would protect his granddaughter from further harm. Instead, he looked down at Emma's huddled form and smiled with approval. "Well," Robert said with a smirk that chilled my blood, "she needed to learn some shame anyway. Maybe now she will think twice before destroying other people's property." What none of them realized was that every word, every cruel laugh, every smug comment was being picked up clearly by the wireless microphone receiver sitting on the side table just 6 feet away. The device I had set up so carefully for Grandma Dorothy's speech was broadcasting their entire conversation directly to the speaker system, recording everything in perfect digital clarity. But Marcus and Robert were too absorbed in their moment of righteous authority to notice the small red recording light blinking on the receiver, or the way some of the relatives near the speakers had begun to look confused and uncomfortable, checking their phones and whispering among themselves. I knelt beside Emma, my hands shaking as I gently touched her reddened cheek. My daughter's sobs had quieted to frightened whimpers, but her small body continued trembling against mine. While I whispered words of comfort and love, my mind raced with a clarity that surprised me. Through my shock and fury, I noticed the speaker system crackling softly, and understanding hit me like lightning. The microphone was still recording. Every cruel word, every laugh, every smug comment had been broadcast to the entire party and captured in digital memory. While I held Emma, I discreetly activated the recording app on my phone, ensuring I had backup evidence of anything else they might say. Around the room, I noticed several relatives holding their phones with confused expressions. Cousin Lisa stood near the main speaker with her mouth hanging open in horror. Uncle James, Grandma Dorothy's younger brother, was staring at Marcus with undisguised disgust. Aunt Sarah had her phone out, clearly recording the ongoing conversation. Marcus continued his tirade, apparently unaware that his words were being preserved for posterity. "Maybe now she will learn some respect for her elders and other people's property," he declared to the room. "This is exactly what happens when children grow up without proper male authority in their lives." Robert nodded approvingly, adding his own commentary. "Single mothers always coddle their children instead of teaching them discipline. This girl needed to understand that her actions affect other people." Patricia, not to be outdone, chimed in with her own poison. "Honestly, this is what we get for letting them come to family events. Like mother, like daughter, always causing drama and disrupting everything." While they congratulated themselves on delivering necessary justice, I helped Emma to the bathroom, buying precious time to form a plan. In the privacy of that small space, I cleaned her tear-stained face and examined the red mark Marcus had left on her cheek. "Mommy," Emma whispered through fresh tears, "why does Uncle Marcus hate us so much?" The question pierced my heart, but it also crystallized my resolve. My 8-year-old daughter should never have to wonder why family members treated her with such cruelty. She deserved protection, love and respect, not violence disguised as discipline. "He does not hate us, sweetheart," I said softly, holding her close. "Some people have forgotten how to be kind, but that is their problem, not ours. And I promise you, no one will ever hurt you like that again." When we returned to the living room, Marcus was still holding court, with the male relatives embellishing his story with each telling. "Sometimes you have to be firm with children and their mothers," he was saying. "They need to learn that there are consequences for destructive behavior." But the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. I noticed immediately that the women had clustered together, their expressions ranging from horrified to furious. The men were split, with the younger generation looking uncomfortable while some of the older relatives nodded approval of Marcus's actions. I discreetly approached the supportive relatives, starting with Lisa, who grabbed my arm the moment I came near. "Haley, I recorded everything," she whispered urgently. "That was absolutely horrible. I cannot believe he hit Emma like that." Uncle James, despite being 70 years old, had clearly heard every word through the speaker system. "In my day, men protected children, especially little girls," he said firmly. "What Marcus did was cowardly and wrong." Aunt Sarah showed me her phone screen where she had captured several minutes of video. "I am sending this to my daughter right now to warn her about bringing her children around Marcus," she said. "And I think you should call the police." Even Grandma Dorothy, despite her heartbreak over the broken vase, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry, dear," she said, pulling Emma into a gentle hug. "What happened to my vase was an accident, but what Marcus did was inexcusable." Emma found comfort in her great-grandmother's arms, the first adult validation she had received since the nightmare began. The sight of my daughter finally feeling safe gave me the courage to execute my plan. Marcus noticed the women clustering around us and strode over with defensive aggression. "I hope you are not filling their heads with nonsense, Haley," he warned. "What happened here was necessary discipline, nothing more." "Just discussing what we all witnessed." "Marcus," I replied calmly, my phone ready in my hand. "Just making sure everyone understands exactly what took place. Nothing took place except a spoiled child learning consequences for her actions," he responded dismissively. "Something she clearly has not learned at home." Robert joined us, still confident in his position as family patriarch. "Women these days make mountains out of molehills," he declared. "A little discipline never hurt anyone. It builds character." The moment had arrived. I looked Marcus directly in the eyes and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You mean when you slapped my 8-year-old daughter across the face and called her useless? A light tap to teach respect," Marcus corrected, his lawyer training showing in his careful word choice. "Something she obviously lacks considering her destructive behavior." More family members gathered around us now, the tension drawing everyone's attention. The room divided visibly along generational and philosophical lines, creating an atmosphere charged with conflict. Patricia stepped beside her husband, trying to control the narrative. Haley has always been dramatic, playing the victim whenever anyone tries to give her advice about raising Emma properly. Emma watched the entire confrontation from the safety of Grandma Dorothy's arms, her young mind trying to process why the adults in her family were fighting about her. The red mark on her cheek served as visible evidence of Marcus's light tap, contradicting his attempts to minimize what had happened. The tension reached a breaking point as modern values clashed with traditional authority, as protective instincts battled enablement of abuse, as truth prepared to confront deception. Then I pulled out my phone and played the recording with perfect clarity. Marcus's voice boomed through the small speaker. "Like mother, like daughter, both are completely useless." His cruel laugh followed exactly as it had happened, captured in undeniable digital proof. Robert's voice came next. "Well, she needed to learn some shame anyway." Their faces transformed from confident authority to shocked disbelief as they realized they had been recorded. The evidence was irrefutable, their own words condemning them more effectively than any accusation I could have made. Marcus recovered first, his legal training kicking in. "You cannot use that recording," he declared desperately. "It is illegal to record someone without their consent." Aunt Sarah smiled grimly as she stepped forward. "Actually, Marcus, this is a one-party consent state. Haley had every legal right to record what was said in her presence." Cousin Lisa held up her phone triumphantly. "And I am posting this to Facebook right now so all your law firm colleagues can see how you treat children." Uncle James added his phone to the display. "This is going to our entire family group chat. Everyone needs to know what kind of man you really are." Patricia began damage control immediately, but her efforts were futile. "Take those videos down right now," she demanded. "You are ruining his career over nothing." "Too late," I said calmly, showing them my cloud storage app. "Everything is already uploaded and backed up. The truth has a way of spreading when people try to hide it." Robert demanded that everyone delete their recordings, his patriarchal authority crumbling as family members openly defied him. But the digital age had made his commands powerless. Within minutes, multiple videos would be circulating online, shared by relatives who refused to stay silent about child abuse. The immediate consequence was swift and decisive. Grandma Dorothy, despite being the smallest person in the room, commanded attention when she spoke. "Marcus and Robert, I want you to leave my home immediately," she said with quiet dignity. "What you did to Emma was wrong, and you are not welcome here until you understand that and make amends." The transformation began immediately right there in Grandma Dorothy's living room. Marcus attempted to argue threatening lawsuits and demanding respect for his position as the eldest grandson, but family members who had never challenged him before now openly supported my grandmother's decision. Uncle James personally escorted them to the door, while Aunt Sarah continued uploading videos to social media platforms. Within 2 hours, the videos had been shared across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Marcus's professional colleagues began seeing footage of him slapping a child and calling her useless. The comments section filled with outrage from strangers who recognized the clear abuse documented in perfect digital clarity. Local parenting groups shared the videos as examples of what never to tolerate, and several news stations reached out for interviews. Patricia tried desperately to control the damage, calling relatives and begging them to remove the posts, but the internet had already taken control of the narrative. Her own social circle began distancing themselves, canceling planned gatherings, and questioning what kind of family they had been associating with. Marcus's law firm received calls within the first day. Clients who had trusted him with their legal affairs now questioned his character and judgment. The partners called an emergency meeting to discuss the public relations nightmare their associate had created. 3 major clients withdrew their contracts immediately, citing concerns about being represented by someone who exhibited such poor judgment and cruelty toward children. The local Child Protective Services opened an investigation, though they quickly determined that Emma was in no danger from me. Instead, they documented the incident involving Marcus and noted the strong family support system now surrounding Emma and me. The social worker commented that she had rarely seen such clear evidence of an abusive incident thanks to the multiple recordings from different angles. Emma began therapy with a counselor who specialized in helping children process family trauma. Dr. Rodriguez worked with Emma to understand that she had done nothing wrong, that accidents happen, and that no adult should ever respond to childhood mistakes with violence. Emma also started art therapy, learning to express her feelings through drawing and painting instead of holding her emotions inside. 3 months later, the long-term consequences became clear. Marcus's marriage was falling apart as Patricia filed for divorce, taking Tyler and seeking sole custody. She claimed in her filing that she could not trust Marcus around their son after witnessing his treatment of Emma. Robert found himself increasingly isolated from family gatherings, with most relatives choosing to avoid events where he might be present. Meanwhile, my life improved dramatically. The viral videos brought unexpected support from my community. The diner where I worked received so many positive calls about employing a protective mother that my manager promoted me to assistant manager with a substantial raise. Local mothers organized playdates for Emma, ensuring she had plenty of positive social interaction with adults who treated children with kindness and respect. Grandma Dorothy made the most significant gesture of all. She quietly changed her will, leaving her house to Emma and me instead of following the traditional pattern of inheritance through the male line. She explained her decision simply: "This house should go to family members who understand the difference between strength and cruelty." The community rallied around single mothers after our story spread, creating new support networks and advocating for stronger child protection laws. The City Council passed an ordinance requiring mandatory reporting training for all adults who work with children, using our situation as an example of how quickly intervention can protect vulnerable kids. Emma thrived in her new environment of support and validation. Her confidence returned, gradually nurtured by therapy sessions and surrounded by adults who consistently showed her that children deserve protection, not punishment. She learned to express her needs clearly, to trust her instincts about safe people, and to understand that family should provide love and security. Marcus was required by court order to complete anger management classes and family counseling before he could have unsupervised visits with Tyler. His legal practice continued declining as word spread about his character. Several professional organizations questioned his membership, and he was passed over for partnership consideration at his firm. The most important lesson emerged slowly through months of healing and growth. I learned that protecting children requires courage to speak truth, even when that truth disrupts family peace. Emma learned that accidents do not deserve punishment, that adult anger is not her responsibility to manage, and that she has advocates who will always defend her right to safety and dignity. Our relationship grew stronger through the crisis. Emma began talking openly about her feelings instead of holding everything inside. She started trusting me to handle difficult situations without her needing to be perfect or invisible. We developed new traditions, new ways of celebrating milestones that honored our small but mighty family unit. The extended family split into clear camps, but this division revealed who had always been our true allies. Grandma Dorothy, Uncle James, Aunt Sarah, and Cousin Lisa became our chosen family people who understood that love requires action, not just words. We gathered for holidays and birthdays in an atmosphere of genuine warmth and mutual respect. I learned that silence enables abuse, that witnesses have power to change outcomes, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to tolerate harmful behavior. Emma learned that she deserves protection, that adults should solve problems with wisdom instead of violence, and that speaking up about wrong treatment is brave, not troublesome. The microphone that captured everything taught us that truth finds a way to surface, that accountability eventually arrives, and that justice sometimes comes through the most unexpected channels. What started as a family celebration became a turning point that protected not just Emma, but potentially other children who might have faced Marcus's anger in the future. 6 months later, Emma and I moved into Grandma Dorothy's house, surrounded by people who celebrate childhood curiosity instead of punishing innocent mistakes. Emma has her own room filled with art supplies and book space to grow and explore without fear of adult rage. She plays freely, laughs loudly, and trusts that the adults around her will respond to problems with solutions, not violence. The most powerful truth I discovered is that family is defined by behavior, not biology. The people who stood up for Emma that day, who shared videos to expose the truth, who surrounded us with support during the aftermath, these are our real family. Blood relationships mean nothing when they come with cruelty and abuse. Emma now knows that she has a voice that matters, advocates who will listen, and a future free from the fear that honest mistakes will result in violence. She understands that protecting others from harm is everyone's responsibility, and that speaking truth, even when it is difficult, creates safety for vulnerable people. The final lesson came from Emma herself, 6 months after that terrible day. She was painting a picture of our new family, Grandma Dorothy, Uncle James, Aunt Sarah, Cousin Lisa, and us, when she looked up and said, "Mommy, I am glad Uncle Marcus is not in our family picture anymore. Real families do not hurt each other." Her wisdom reminded me that children often see truth more clearly than adults, that they understand the difference between love and control, between protection and domination. The most powerful voice is indeed the one that speaks for those who cannot yet speak for themselves, but sometimes the most important lesson comes from listening when they find their own voice and use it to describe what family should actually feel like. What happened that day changed everything, but it changed it for the better. We discovered who we could count on, what we would not tolerate, and how much strength we had when we stood together. The microphone may have been accidental, but the courage to use the truth it revealed was a choice that protected my daughter and potentially countless other children from adults who mistake cruelty for authority. If you have ever witnessed someone treating a child with cruelty, please share this story to remind others that speaking up can change everything. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed the line? How did you find the courage to protect someone vulnerable? Please comment below and share your experiences. Hit that like button. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more real stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with anyone who needs to remember that children deserve protection, not punishment. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when someone needs your voice. May you always have the courage to speak up for those who need protection, and may you always remember that real love never looks like violence.